This week we're looking at attitudes. Attitudes are basically evaluative beliefs that we have about things. So it's not so much what your parents were accusing you of having when you were an adolescent, but it's more so the ideas that you have about certain things in the world, in your life, about certain people, and they involve some sort of evaluation component to them. So my attitude towards safe driving, my attitude towards abortion, my attitude towards, these are all things that we have thought about, that we've made a decision about. Now, we may not have thought long and hard about them, but we definitely have thought about them and made a decision as to whether or not we support them or we don't support them, and how we emotionally feel about them. So we all have different attitudes towards different things, and one thing that we recognize is that a lot of times our attitudes go along with the roles that we play. So a role that you play is, and we've talked about this before, kind of the different parts of your life. So the roles that you play include being a student, being a sibling, being an employee, or being a manager, being a spouse, things like that. And what we recognize is that sometimes there are kind of required or expected attitudes that go along with certain roles. And so one of the ways that we've found in research to change an attitude is to ask people to role play. And so by getting them to actively participate in pretending to be that role or play that role, we find that people can actually change their attitudes towards certain things, which can be in some cases beneficial and in some cases detrimental, depending on obviously what our goal is and what the role is that we're asking people to play. So if you're interested in becoming a therapist after you've finished school, one thing that you might recognize is the utility of role playing to help people understand others' attitudes that they interact with. Many times when people come to counseling, they have difficulties in dealing with other people, and so we want to help them be able to empathize with these other people and recognize how some of their problems might come from the fact that their attitudes towards certain things are different. So role-playing can actually change people's attitudes once they recognize that a different role or playing a different role actually helps them to think about attitudes in a different way. And we also, in this chapter, are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics for social psychology, which is cognitive dissonance, which is the idea that humans essentially cannot hold two cognitions or thoughts that are competing in mind about the self at the same time. So we can't think both I'm smart and I'm dumb at the same time. We would have to reconcile one of those in a certain way, maybe downplaying one of the thoughts and maybe, moving up another one of the thoughts, or justifying a behavior that doesn't match one of our cognitions. So if you think of a person who has gone out and told people, I'm trying to save money because I want to buy a new car. So that's cognition number one. I'm trying to save money because I want to buy a new car. And then cognition number two is I just went and spent $600 on a new purse. So if the person is experiencing this anxiety of recognizing that their cognitions, these two cognitions, don't work well together, then they're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. So first of all, they can return the purse, or they can kind of decrease the importance of saving money for a new car, like, I don't really need a new car right now anyway, or, I can wait another year for a new car, things like that. So we start to kind of make one of the cognitions more important and make the other cognition less important in order to deal with that kind of uneasiness that we feel that goes along with recognizing that we are basically being a hypocrite. So cognitive dissonance is that anxiety, that uncomfortable feeling, and so we change either our thoughts or our behaviors in order to kind of align ourselves with our original thought or to decrease the importance of our original thought so that we can decrease that feeling of anxiety. So a lot of times once we've made a new decision based upon attempting to deal with cognitive dissonance, then we start looking around and seeing that other people have made the same decision, and that makes us feel better. So let me give you an example. In 2010, I decided that I wanted to buy a new car. And so, not a new car, but a new to me car. So I took my Pontiac Vibe, which is what I was driving at the time, and brought it to the dealership and decided that I was going to trade that in and get something else that was more fuel efficient. So I was looking at either the Toyota Prius or at the Honda Fit. And my husband is really tall. He's 6'8". And so after I had driven both of these cars, I brought him back and I said, okay, these are the two that I'm looking at that I want to buy. And I need your help in deciding which one I want to get. And so he really liked the Honda Fit, whereas I was leaning towards the Prius. And so it kind of got to the point where it didn't really matter what he said because he couldn't really fit well in either of them. And plus it was going to be my car. Justify. So I decided that I was going to get the Toyota Prius, and so I started thinking less about the Honda Fit and thinking, oh, well, it's smaller, it gets less gas mileage, all this sort of stuff. Whereas my husband, whose original view was that we should get the Honda Fit, kept driving around and seeing other people driving Honda Fits and saying like, oh, see, that person's driving a Fit and that person's driving a Fit, and I definitely see fewer Priuses on the road than I see Fits. And so this is what we call selective attention. So once I've made a decision, then I start really kind of looking around in my environment and selectively attending to the things that support the idea that I came up with or the decision that I made previously. So I see all of these other Priuses on the road, but I don't see Honda Fits on the road. Or I see Honda Fits on the side of the road having, had problems, but I don't see Toyota Priuses on the side of the road because Toyota Priuses don't have problems. So we look around to justify the decision that we make previously in order to make ourselves feel better. Because obviously I'm right. Going back to rights, rules of social psychology, I'm right. I made the correct decision, so now I have to find evidence to support that within my environment. Another topic that this chapter looks at is what we call the overjustification effect, and we see this often in students when they're trying to decide what they want to do for a job. They say, well, my career counselor in high school said that if I like to read, then maybe I should go into book publishing or something like that. And what we found is that when we turn a hobby into a job, so when we start getting paid to do something that we originally liked to do, we actually end up decreasing how much we like to do that thing. So I have a good friend who has always been a big reader. She's always been interested in reading new books, and she's now a copy editor. And when you ask her, okay, how many books do you actually now read every week? She'll say, excuse me, maybe one. Total, complete, finish, one tops, because I'm just so tired of reading. So what we see is that by offering an external justification, so money or praise, things like that, for people to do something that they originally liked to do, such as read, is actually going to decrease that internal motivation because we recognize that there's an external motivator that's causing us to behave in this manner. So the brain starts to think, well, I'm not reading because I like to read, I'm reading because I'm getting paid to do it. And the motivation to read on a personal level actually decreases because we're getting an external justification of that payment. So what we see is what we call the overjustification effect. So I'm getting paid to do this as opposed to having internal motivation to do it. And so if I continued having internal motivation and external motivation of money, then that wouldn't make sense to my brain. So now I'm just going to start thinking about how I get paid to do this, which will decrease my overall motivation to do it. So we're basically over-justifying the behaviors that we originally liked to do, which will decrease, unfortunately, the motivation that we have to do them. So hopefully you'll find some interesting topics relating to attitudes this week, especially relating to how people develop attitudes, how they maintain attitudes, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to use this information to understand both yourself and other people in terms of the attitudes that they have towards specific things in their lives, and how those attitudes impact our behaviors, and also how our behaviors then turn around and impact and influence change in attitude. Have a great week. Thanks.